set, hut.
As the hills of West Virginia resound with the sound of Golden Blue football.
Almost heaven, West Virginia.
Now let's bring on the Mountaineers. Goes around about the 50, the 10, the 5. A touchdown, West Virginia. He did it.
He did it. Patrick White. Touchdown, Tay Von Austin.
The Don Nehlen's Mountaineers enjoy walking in where angels fear to tread.
I think you think that these guys are going to fall over dead for you. Well, I got news for you. They're going to punch you right in the mouth. It's Mountaineer pride!
Nothing cheap, nothing dirty, but West Virginia football. West Virginia football.
Leave no doubt tonight. They shouldn't have played the old Golden Blue. Not this night.
They've done it. They've done it. A perfect season. And the Mountaineers, for the first time in history, undefeated and untied.
Don Nehlen and his Mountaineers, for the second time, have finished a regular season with an unblemished mark.
Ain't no stopping the Golden Blue.
It is a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be.
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into the CRW podcast here for episode 209, our Baylor review and reaction. Unfortunately, West Virginia falls to the Baylor Bears at home. It's been a tough home season for West Virginia. They dropped this one 49-35 to fall to 5-5 overall on the season and 4-3 in Big 12 conference play. And it's a disappointing loss, obviously, with everything that was in play, still in play for West Virginia here in the latter portion of the season, had kind of finally got all the fan base to the point where we had bought back in a little bit and had a little bit of hope, and they get us right back in just to rip it all away again and unfortunately break our hearts there. As we said, it's been a tough season at home. We'll talk some more about that momentarily. As always, we'll go through this episode. I'll hit some interesting things of note. We'll do the stat breakdown, and then we'll get into some Big 12 talk there at the tail end as far as what's on the schedule here for episode 209. But in addition to that, of course, for those of you guys tuned in here on the CRW side, watching this on November 17th, the live edition, I decided to, record this podcast episode live because I wanted to give you guys the chance to throw in some of your thoughts, your questions, your comments, your concerns. Obviously, I'm sure there's a lot to address throughout Mountaineer Nation right now with everything going on. I know a lot of people are talking we need to go back to maybe firing the coach at the end of the season again. I'm sure that's something that's still up for discussion among many other things here after, a tough home loss and what was, a golden opportunity for West Virginia, as I stated there in the thumbnail. So as I go through the episode, like I said, I'm still going to go through this like we do our traditional podcast episode so that then that version can be up on the audio side and up on WVSportsNow.com. But at the tail end of the episode, I want to come back and address some of your all's questions and comments. So if you want, got anything to ask, any questions, comments, concerns, throw them in the chat there. If you're in here live watching with me, I'll address those at the tail end. If you want to be sure that your comment is one that gets addressed or your question is one that gets answered, the foolproof way to do that, of course, is to send it as a super chat. And, of course, if you're a channel member here at the CRW, I will address all of those comments from channel members as well. But if you've got a question, comment, concern as far as WVU is concerned, throw it in the chat. I'll address all those at the end. Like I said, a foolproof way is send it as a super chat, or if you're a channel member here, I'll address yours as well. And if you haven't already, hit that like button on this video. That helps a ton with the YouTube algorithm. And be sure to subscribe here for a ton of Mountaineer football content. And, if you're into additional WVU football content, if you're someone that just can't get enough, hit the join button and become a channel member here. Helps us keep the mics recording and the cameras rolling. And you get a ton of bonus content, including game rewatches, film breakdowns, player grades videos, snap counts, depth chart projections, all of that good stuff there available for channel members, as well as priority in the chat and comments and such. But like I said, throw your thoughts there in the chat. I'll address those towards the tail end of the episode. But going to proceed as I usually do here on the podcast now and cover this regularly, starting with just let's start with my kind of thoughts here from the game, just kind of wider perspective on everything that was involved, because really I think a few things played out that I was kind of afraid of that I talked about on the preview podcast. One of those being the fact that the defense performed so well against Cincinnati in Jeff Kuntz's debut. And I wondered and kind of pontificated if that was because, maybe the element of surprise. When you are a new coordinator, you're doing things differently. Maybe you're going to call things differently. Maybe you're going to switch up which coverage shell West Virginia's using on the back end. And they did switch up that coverage shell some, went from playing a lot of cover 2 to more quarters coverage and cover 3 at times. And so, things like that. But then you put that on film against Cincinnati. And so for me, then it was watching these final 3 games, saying, can they replicate that success under Jeff Kuntz, or was it just kind of catching someone off guard with the element of surprise? And I don't know if that's, necessarily the case yet, but it certainly seems to be right now that they caught Cincinnati with the element of surprise. And now Baylor, had the extra week to prepare, had the week to study up and really game plan some good things, because I guess really overall, the defense's performance, what the main difference was as opposed to this game versus the Cincinnati game, was you didn't get the takeaways that you did against Cincinnati. There's many times Cincinnati was putting drives together. You were able to get a key takeaway. You forced 3 turnovers in that game and you're able to get a win. This game, you don't force any turnovers. You end up giving up 49 points. So you kind of see both ends of that spectrum between the first 2 games with Jeff Kuntz as the, interim defensive coordinator there. But despite that fact, I think that if you want to point to one positive, maybe a silver lining of the defense under Jeff Kuntz in this game, that's the fact that they did make some halftime adjustments, which is not something that we saw a lot under Jordan Leslie, not something that the staff has been strong at in the past, is making, defensive adjustments or halftime adjustments, in-game adjustments, whatever you want to call it. And I think in this game, you saw that because you come out in that third quarter, you get that 47-second drive to get the points before the half, just as the clock expires, as Garrett Green runs in the touchdown. Another 2-minute drill for Garrett Green. He does a great job with those. West Virginia cuts it to a 1-score game. And we all knew Baylor's getting the ball after halftime. Can our defense get a stop? We need a stop. Well, not only did they get the stop, they got the stop multiple times, actually, because in that third quarter, this right here is credit to Keenan Cummings here on X. Got this from him. He put this information up there. But in the third quarter, West Virginia's defense held Baylor to 0 points, just 81 total yards, and only 4 first downs in the whole third quarter. And I was at the game, and me and Steven, one of the co-hosts here at the CRW, were sitting up in the stands, and we get the stop to begin the half, and you're a little excited. You're like, okay, we're down 35-28. We're going to go down. We're going to tie this thing up. It's going to be a back-and-forth game, because to that point, really, you kind of felt like this might be like the 2012 game all over again. I mean, you look at the halftime score, you look at the halftime stats. West Virginia's offense was having one of their best performances of the year. Baylor's offense was looking like they couldn't be stopped. So you finally get the stop and you're feeling like, all right, here we go. We're going to score. It's going to be back and forth second half as well. And, we got the stop that we needed to make this, where it's not Baylor's advantage and they're up 7 anymore. It'll be back and forth. But instead, that just completely flipped. West Virginia's offense, in the first half was playing well and their defense wasn't playing that good. Then third quarter comes around, your defense finally figures some things out, makes some adjustments, and your offense can't capitalize. And it's not your offense can't capitalize as far as they're just stuck in the mud, 3 and out of 3 and out. It's more frustrating because the offense was putting together drives there in that third quarter, getting deep into, Baylor territory 2-3 times and just couldn't finish, whether it was a turnover one time, Garrett threw an interception, or it was failing to convert on a fourth down. Just little minor mistakes that come up to cost you in this game. You think of the 4th and 1, 4th and 2, whatever it was. They had the missed blocking assignment. They had a nice play drawn up to Cole Taylor, could have converted. Instead, you don't get it. So I think to me, that's the key sequence of this game, especially when you look in the second half. West Virginia gets the stops and then their offense can't capitalize. You had so many chances down 35-28. I told Steven, I was like, when they didn't score the first, I was like, I don't know if we'll get another one. We got a second chance. I was like, okay, we got a second one. We got to do it this time. Didn't score. Then I was like, no way we're getting a third one. You get a third one. You get a third chance down 35-28 and still couldn't put one into the end zone. And at that point, you just knew the writing was on the wall. Unfortunately, I mean, you hate to say that, but that's just the way that it's been. And unfortunately, it continues a bad trend for West Virginia as far as terrible third quarters at home. And, yet again, it goes into the fact of a lot of people questioning why we continue to get the ball first to begin games, which sometimes other teams win the toss and defer. But when we win it, we elect to receive. I've got a stat on that, which I'm sure you guys that have been following the review shows have seen in the interesting things of note section. I'll get to that momentarily. But obviously, when you see something like the bad third quarters that you're having at home, maybe you start to realize that's not the best strategy. And shout out to Skylar Callahan for this one on social media, because WVU in their past 4 home games has scored a total of 3 points in the third quarter. So all the third quarters combined over your last 4 home games, 3 points. That's absolutely struggling terribly in the third quarter of your home games, and you're struggling at home in general. Right now, you've secured with this loss to Baylor a losing record at home. Unfortunately, now we know we were excited coming into the year. 7 home games we saw on the schedule. Oh man, we got 7 home games this year. That's going to work out well for us, especially after last season when we had such a good home record. This year, it's really flipped on its head. We're 2-4 at home, 1 home game remaining, hoping to finish 3-4. But if you lose, you will finish the season 2-5 at home. Why is that huge? Chris Anderson from 247 put it the best. It would be the second time in 133 years that WVU had lost 5 home games in one season. 1990 is the only other time it's ever happened that you lost 5 home games in one season. So not good company, not a good stat there if you're West Virginia. And it's just mind-boggling the home struggles that the Mountaineers have had to this point in the season. Really don't quite understand it. And it's just, one of many mind-boggling things with this team that's kind of gone on this year, especially, leading into the year. They were preaching what their goal was making it to the Big 12 title game. We need to make it to the Big 12 title game. And here you are, in November, which another thing that you continuously talk about with this staff is they've wanted to play important games in November. Here we are. We get to November. We're playing important games. You got a 4-game stretch. If you win these 4 games, of course, starting back with that game against Cincinnati, was now down to 3 games with this Baylor game. You got a great chance of potentially ending up in the Big 12 title game. You just have to do your part. And especially everything was set up for you. The Big 12 chaos continued this weekend. There was more upsets and stuff. We'll talk about that at the tail end of the episode and around the Big 12 segment. But everything was there. It was all set up for you. All you had to do was win, another quote-unquote big game, an important game. And it seems like every time we get one of these set up, we get a chance to where everything's looking like, okay, maybe we're turning the corner. We just have to win this one important game, this one big game. It's going to show everybody something. We never win that game. It's been 6 years of not winning that game. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to rant, but it is what it is, guys. You guys know in the fan base as well as I do. If you're not winning the big one, it's not going to matter, man. And we've not been able to win the big one. We've not been able to win the important one. We've beaten teams with losing records. When we get down to the teams that are not even good, the teams that are average, I would say, we struggle in that aspect even. And, you got to beat the good teams if you want to be competitive in the conference. West Virginia had a chance to show they were a competitor in the conference and remain in this race. And yet again, unfortunately, Neil Brown and his staff failed to achieve that goal. And West Virginia falls to 500 on the year, still searching for bowl eligibility with 2 games left. Pretty much now out of the Big 12 race. I mean, mathematically, I think you could figure out some crazy scenarios to get West Virginia in there. But that's a pipe dream now, guys. It's over and done with. You were playing an elimination game against Cincinnati and you won. You played essentially another one against Baylor. As far as you were concerned, Baylor already had the 3 conference losses, but now you're definitely out of the mix when you had a chance to keep yourself afloat. And that's really just the main storyline for me coming out of this one is another big opportunity, a golden opportunity with everything set up for West Virginia, and they fail again. So that's just kind of my overall thoughts on the game. I'm going to get into interesting things of note now. But before I do that, I know we've seen a few people join in on the live here. I am recording this podcast episode live here. It'll be up for playback, of course, on all audio platforms. It'll be up on WVSportsNow.com, edited as well. But I'm going to go through the segments as I usually do in the podcast. But if you have any questions, comments, concerns, throw them in the chat. I'm going to address those at the tail end. Foolproof way to get yours recognized, get your question answered is to send it as a super chat. Or, of course, if you're a channel member here, I'll address those as well at the tail end. But throw them in there. I want to hear your all's thoughts on the game, the season, the program status, anything you got there, throw it in the chat, and I'll address those at the tail end. So moving on now to interesting things of note. And this week, I don't have a ton of interesting things of note, just got a handful that I jotted down here, really. 17th consecutive game that West Virginia has gotten the ball first. Obviously, it kind of teased that one a little bit earlier. That streak continues now up to 17 consecutive. The loss versus Baylor marked only the second time at WVU that Neil Brown has lost a game when his team runs for over 200 yards. He's now 18-2 when West Virginia runs for over 200 yards. The win was Baylor's first ever in Morgantown. They snapped their losing streak. And then a couple on Garrett Green here. Garrett Green is now tied for 8th in WVU history in rushing touchdowns with 27. And it was Garrett Green's 5th consecutive game with 85 plus rushing yards, which, good stat to have there in his return. So that's what I had there as far as interesting things of note were concerned for this game. Other than that, I'm going to get into the stat breakdown here now, guys, but I wanted to take a second here now and just, say the fans really deserve better at home, man. Just speaking from myself here, and I know because there's a lot of people out there that probably share a similar story that I do, living in the bottom part of the state, got season tickets this year, go up 3.5 hours there, 3.5 hours back. And unfortunately, I've enjoyed the games more watching them on my TV when they're playing, away, because they performed better in those. And not to say that it's not a good time, we still have fun, Neil Brown. Don't worry about that. We still have fun. Yes, but it's a whole hell of a lot more fun when we're winning football games, especially when we're winning home games, because Mountaineer Field used to be a place, where people feared to come and play. And now that's just not the case anymore. And to me, that's almost the worst thing that I can say right now in a time where there's a lot of pessimism going on and a lot of things going against this coaching staff, is I hate the fact that they've kind of killed what we did have as such a great home field advantage here at Mountaineer Field, especially this season. It's all but forgotten. So did want to touch that. And then I think also, a lot of people are coming down on Neil Brown hard now, and unfortunately, rightfully so. I mentioned some things earlier there, but also what I mentioned in the preview show has, come home to roost. Unfortunately, the fact that he decided to stick with Garrett Green as his starter over Nico when the team had built up some momentum there really hurt as well, because now people can, point to that and say, hey, another bad decision by you. You messed up the team's momentum there. So that's just something else that I wanted to touch there as far as my kind of talking points. And with interesting things of note, now let's do the stat breakdown, and then we will talk a little bit of Big 12 talk. But for you guys in here on the live stream, I'm going to post a poll here in the chat because I want to hear what you guys think, and I'll end the poll later and announce the results. But I'm going to ask you guys, what do you think West Virginia's final regular season record will be now? West Virginia sits 5-5, 2 games left. So I'm going to put this up in the poll. This poll should be up in the chat now, guys. Final regular season record for WVU. Will they win the next 2 games, finish 7-5? Will they split them, finish 6-6, or do they lose the next 2 and finish 7-5? Vote on that poll in the chat if you would. I'll discuss the results here towards the tail end of the episode when I address some of your comments. And for those of you that are just popping in now, got any questions, comments, concerns, throw them in the chat. I'm going to address some of those at the tail end of the episode. If you want to make sure yours gets addressed, you can always send it as a super chat, or if you're a channel member here, I'll be sure and try and address all of those as well. But let's get into the stat breakdown from the game now. For the Mountaineers, unfortunately, in the loss, we'll discuss some of the team stats, and then we will discuss the individual stats here as well. All right, team stats from this one, and it's so interesting, man. Just a lot of these stats are usually stats that if West Virginia has these in the Neil Brown era, they come out with a win. Didn't happen this time, unfortunately. I mentioned already in the interesting things of note there, West Virginia runs for over 200 plus yards and doesn't win the game. Only the second time that's ever happened in Neil Brown's tenure, now 18-2. But some of these other stats also are, things where Neil Brown usually wins the games, including first downs. Usually if he gets, 21 plus, it's usually a win for West Virginia. He gets 29 in this game, and West Virginia loses. Such a crazy stat there. But 29 first downs for the Mountaineers, 26 for Baylor. Third downs hurt West Virginia as far as them not converting on offense. And then, of course, at times this year, Neil Brown said that stat's been misleading because they've converted on fourth. Well, they didn't convert on fourth this week. They were 2 of 5 on fourth downs. And third down defense was an issue yet again, unfortunately. Had been an issue earlier in the season, did a bit of a better job of it against Cincinnati in Jeff Kuntz's first game, but that problem rears its head again. Baylor goes 8 of 13 on third down and 1 of 1 on fourth down. Total yards, 512 for Baylor, 499 for West Virginia. The Bears passed for 329. Sawyer Robertson continues his outstanding play, one of the best quarterbacks, not only in the conference, but in the country in recent weeks, and Baylor's offense continues their hot play as well. Garrett Green throws for 237 in his return. Unfortunately, did throw an interception there that was pretty costly when I was talking about WVU still down 35-28. That happened then. 262 rushing yards for the Mountaineers. Had over 200 in the first half, actually. 183 for Baylor, but they did have a couple of plays that really hurt West Virginia, including a long touchdown run. 9 penalties on the Bears, 3 on the Mountaineers. Baylor wins the turnover battle. They didn't turn the ball over. West Virginia turned it over once. Like I said, not forcing turnovers, one of the main differences for the defense this week. But West Virginia does win time of possession, 32-28. So you look there, West Virginia low penalties. West Virginia wins time of possession. West Virginia runs for over 250 yards. West Virginia has 29 first downs. All four of those things are usually things you look at following a West Virginia win, but not this time. 49-35, Baylor comes out on top after a stronger second half. West Virginia didn't score until garbage time in the second half, and that was essentially the difference in the game as West Virginia's offensive second half collapse. But box score-wise, let's talk about some of the individual stats here for the Mountaineers. So we mentioned Garrett Green, strong performance in his return. I do got to credit him for that. I know you can question the decision-making at times. I know, obviously, the completion percentage still isn't there. I know he still threw an interception that was costly. All of those things, yes, I'm with you. I get that. But also, West Virginia is not in a position to, make this a game to where they're only down 7 in the second half without Garrett Green's performance, especially in the first half. A lot of the things that he was doing and has really carried West Virginia offensively in this game. 237 passing yards, 129 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns, had 22 carries, probably more than you want him to carry the ball, probably more than you want him to throw the ball as well, but that's just kind of how the game unfolded. 16 for 67 for Jaheim, 9 for 60, and a touchdown for C.J. Donaldson. He probably could have afforded a few more carries. Receiving wise, 3 for 71 for Cole Taylor to lead in yards. For Hudson Clement to lead in yards. Cole Taylor leads in receptions with 5, picks up 56 yards and a touchdown. Justin Robinson, 2 catches, 36 yards, and Traylon Ray, 3 catches, 22 yards, and a touchdown. And obviously, this is, of course, where we have to address the ugly injury. You hated to see it, especially for a guy that's been really having some strong games recently and was standing out, getting separation again in this game. And just one of those freak things, unfortunately, it was like almost right directly in front of where our seats are in our section there. And just saw it happen and said, yeah, that's not good. And of course, obviously, I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen it on social media, just a kind of gruesome injury, unfortunately, and Traylon Ray out for the rest of the season, obviously, and you hate it. And just, thoughts, good prayers, well wishes there to Traylon Ray as he recovers from that injury, as West Virginia will be without him for the remainder of the season. Couldn't not address that one. Then you get 2 catches for 19 yards for Rodney Gallagher, 1 for 16 for Day Farmer, finally getting him involved, and then a catch each for Jaheim, Preston, and CJ. So those are the West Virginia offensive stats. Like I said, not a bad game when you look at the team stats, here, and you look at the box score. But when you watched it, you knew that the second half collapse really hurt. And this offense, I think you can obviously point blame at both sides. You can point blame at the defense for, not hardly being able to stop Baylor outside of that third quarter. Obviously not a good performance on their end. And then you can point at the offense for not, holding up their end of the bargain. West Virginia just has not done a good job of complementary football this season, something that they strive for. Hasn't happened a lot. You've had games where special teams has played good. You've had games where special teams and defense has played good. You've had games where offense has played good. But you've not had a game where all three have played good together. Arguably at this game, you had all three play good at different points in the game, but can't have that moment where they're all gelling yet, and that cost you yet again. And then as far as the West Virginia defensive stats are concerned, Reed Carrico, strong performance, 16 total tackles. Anthony Wilson, 15 tackles, 9 of those being solo. Trotter gets 9 tackles, sat out the first couple of series of the game. Neil Brown mentioned that it was because he didn't practice all week, but failed to mention whether that was due to an injury or due to, a disciplinary situation or what was going on there. But it was obvious to me, and I think it cost you on those first couple of drives as Baylor scored, and I literally was asking Steven sitting beside me, where's Trotter? Why is Trotter not on the field? They never said anything about Trotter being hurt. Where's he at? And then finally comes in the second quarter there, I think the third series for the defense, and performed well while he was in there. And then you get a TFL from KK Tarnu. You get a sack from Sean Martin and a TFL. West Virginia's only sack of the game. I think Baylor's offensive line did a really good job. They really keyed on TJ Jackson, and they really held West Virginia's pass rush at bay. And West Virginia wasn't able to, create that havoc that they created against Cincinnati, and they weren't able to get those turnovers, because of that as well. Which, goes back to my key to victory for this game was getting some pressure on Robertson, creating some more of that, good pass rush to lead to some of that havoc that allowed you to get those turnovers against Cincinnati. Didn't happen this game, didn't get it, and you don't get the victory. So I think that key proved to be vital. Didn't happen for West Virginia. Not a good performance for the defense overall, not a good performance from the offense, but both had their moments. And, the defense there moment was in the third quarter, and the offense couldn't capitalize then on that. But that's pretty much all I got on the West Virginia Baylor game, guys. Ready to put that one behind us now. WVU falls to 5-5 overall in the season, 4-3 in the Big 12. We'll see what happens in these final two games, and I think honestly that could determine the future of members of this coaching staff and maybe the head of this coaching staff. We'll see what plays out. I'm already hearing rumors of players maybe wanting to transfer no matter what happens, no matter who's the coach next year, and that's not a good sign of the future. But we'll see, what happens in these final two games, and that's probably going to be pretty telling as to what happens in this offseason as far as staff moves are concerned. That's probably what we're looking at now, but we have to hope West Virginia can win one of these final two, at least get to a bowl game this season. That's what we're hoping to see. But of course, we'll be cheering for the Mountaineers to win out and perform well in their final two Big 12 games, which, speaking of the Big 12, guys, brings us to the Around the Big 12 segment here, and we will talk about the Week 12 scores. Yet another crazy week in the Big 12 Conference. More upsets, more crazy action going on within this conference. So let's talk a little bit about it. Some surprising results, starting with one on Friday that I don't think a lot of us saw coming, with how Arizona had played recently versus how Houston had played recently. Arizona 27-3. But I'll tell you, a lot of these Friday games throughout college football this season have been kind of wacky. I would consider this another one, as Arizona gets the win. And then we get to the Saturday slate here. And I mentioned a lot of things went West Virginia's way as far as people that they needed to lose, but one of those that didn't go West Virginia's way was the Utah and Colorado game, as Colorado defeats Utah 49-24. Colorado's defense showed up early, kind of kept it close for a while, but Colorado, just way too much firepower for Utah to keep up with, especially Utah now has lost a third quarterback on the year. Isaac Wilson back in there for them at the QB spot, and they couldn't get it done. Colorado continues right now to be in the driver's seat to make that Big 12 championship game, potentially face BYU. More on that momentarily, but they get the win, 49-24. And then, of course, another team that scored 49 points is one we talked about there, Baylor. They're really hot in recent weeks, and unfortunately that continues. Fourth straight win for the Bears as they beat WVU 49-35, as we just discussed. And then one of the other results that kind of surprised me, Arizona State handling Kansas State in Manhattan 24-14. Arizona State, you could make a case for Colorado and you can make a case for BYU, but to me, Arizona State's the surprise team of the conference this year, because I don't think anyone saw them with the chance to make the Big 12 title game with 2 games left in the season, as they still have only 2 conference losses, and they took down another team that did have 2 conference losses. So that was essentially another elimination game. It was our game of the week this week, and Arizona State gets the win there. Shout out to the Fighting Kenny Dillinghams, Cam Scattaboo, of course, Steven's favorite fantasy player on his college fantasy team there. They get the win 24-14. And then Iowa State taking down Cincinnati 34-17 in Ames. Iowa State bounces back after a couple of, tough weeks there, find a way to right the ship and handle Cincinnati 34-17. And, don't look now as far as we're concerned as West Virginia fans, because when we beat Cincinnati, we were saying, hey, we beat a winning team. But now another loss. Who knows if they'll end the season as a winning team? Could not be another check mark in Neil Brown's corner. Could be one that goes in the opposite direction of beating teams that, he has beaten, unfortunately. And that's the ones that have, losing records and losing conference records. Usually we haven't done a good job beating winning teams in this conference, even over the past couple of years, even back last year. We didn't, even despite our good record. But nonetheless, I digress on that. It's enough of the rant on this coaching staff. I think you guys get where I'm coming from there. But Iowa State gets the win 34-17. And then the nightcap in the Big 12 produced maybe not the most surprising result, but the biggest result that, sends shockwaves throughout the conference, as this crazy conference just gets even crazier, as the one sure thing you had was an undefeated BYU that was kind of staying out of the craziness involved throughout the rest of the conference. But hey, they've thrown their hat in that ring now. They flirted with danger a couple of times in recent weeks and been able to escape late. They tried to do that again here, but couldn't get the late score. And Kansas, man, have they finally got it figured out or what? They were 2-6 at one point a couple of weeks ago, but I talked about in that show when they were 2-6, how, all of those losses except for one were by one score. And if they ever find a way to, close out football games, they're going to be a dangerous team. Well, not only have they found a way to close out football games, they win a one-score game here against, what had been the Big 12's top team. on the road in Provo, a very tough place to play. But they've got Jalen Daniels looking like his old self again. So watch out for Kansas. They may go from 2-6 to bowl eligibility and 6-6. They've really righted the ship and looked like the team that we kind of maybe thought they would be coming into the season at times, as they shock the Big 12 world and in effect take down the lone undefeated BYU now with the conference loss as well, and just shakes up the Big 12 standings even further with that 17-13 win for the Jayhawks. So those are the results from this past week in the Big 12. They're crazy already through week 12, but now we got to talk a little bit about those Big 12 standings, guys. A Big 12 standings update here on episode 209 of the CRW podcast, our Baylor review and reaction. This will be our final segment here on this episode. But before I get into that, guys, I want to remind you all that are in here live on the CRW side of things, throw your thoughts there in the chat. Questions, comments, concerns. I'm going to address those following this segment. Foolproof way you can have your question answered, your chat pulled up as send it as a super chat, and I'll address those questions from channel members as well. But I will catch up on those momentarily. And then, of course, if you haven't yet voted in the poll, I'll be in that momentarily and seeing the results from that as well. But let's get on with the Big 12 standings update. All right. So despite their loss, BYU still hangs on to the top spot, if I can get that out correctly, in the conference because, Colorado is the only other team with one loss in the conference. Everyone else has at least two. So you got BYU first, Colorado second, both 6-1 in the conference. BYU 9-1 overall, Colorado 8-2. Then you got two teams now only tied with two conference losses, those being Iowa State and Arizona State, both 5-2 in the conference, 8-2 overall. And then you get a slew of teams here tied at 4-3 in the conference, West Virginia being one of those. So this makes up your 5 through 9 with K-State, Baylor, Texas Tech, TCU, and WVU, all 4-3 in the conference. And then here in 10 through 16, you have Cincinnati, Kansas, and Houston all at 3-4 in the conference. And then you have UCF, Arizona at 2-5, Utah at 1-6, and Oklahoma State still 0-7 in Big 12 conference play. So there's your standings after 12 weeks, 2 regular season weeks remaining, and we'll find out who goes to the Big 12 conference championship game. Got a feeling there's going to be some crazy tiebreakers in place when it's all said and done, but that's how the standings sit currently. And that is pretty much all I have here for episode 209, guys. Just want to say, before we get ready to, close up shop here on the Baylor review and reaction, I appreciate you guys tuning into this one any way you've chosen to do so, whether you tuned into the video version here on the CRW YouTube, which if you did, be sure to hit the like button, give us a thumbs up. That helps a ton with the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe here for a ton of WVU football content throughout this season and into the off season, as well as we cover transfer portal moves and recruiting and maybe coaching staff moves. We have to deal with those as well. And then if you haven't already, you can become a channel member here of the Country Roads Webcast YouTube channel and get extra bonus WVU football content as well. But we appreciate you listening on the audio side. You can find any podcast platform you like, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, you name it. Check us out there and leave us a rating, preferably a 5-star one if you would. And shout out to the good folks over at WVSportsNow.com for hosting our episodes on their website as well. All right, guys. So before I wrap up this podcast in its entirety, got to touch up with you guys in the chat now. Appreciate you guys that have tuned into this one live. Appreciate you guys waiting throughout the podcast portion. Now I'm going to get to some of your all's comments, and I'm going to check out these poll results. But first, wet my whistle a little bit. Oh, needed that. Throat was drier than the Mojave Desert. But let's check out in this poll. I'm going to give you guys the results, and then I will catch up on some of your all's comments here, and then we will close up shop. Appreciate you guys. Haven't done one of these live in a while, just a podcast recording, but doing it live with you guys, giving you guys a chance to throw in some of your thoughts at the end. If you guys enjoy this, try and do it more often. Maybe let me know in the chat or in the comments if you're watching this after the fact, if you enjoy it. That way when we do these live on occasion. But all right, having said that, let's end this poll. Let's see the results, guys. Appreciate everybody that voted here. Okay, where are my poll results? All right, here we are. So what will WVU's final regular season record be in 2024? The winner is 6-6 is what you guys are predicting. 66% of you voted for 6-6. 22% voted 7-5. Hey, you got some optimistic folks with the gold and blue glasses on. I'm never mad at that. And then 5-7 at 11%. So 6-6 is what you guys are thinking. West Virginia finishes the regular season. And honestly, I think I kind of agree with you. I think West Virginia splits these next two games. What matter that comes in, we'll have to wait and see. But let me address some of your all's comments here, and then I will get ready to close up shop here. Appreciate you guys for being here. I see channel member Tim Green in here. What's going on, Tim? Appreciate you as always. It's not okay. Golf says, looking back, it makes me wonder how long ago Neil lost the team, and if possibly this season he never had them from the start. I guess is the bargaining stage of grief. Yeah, that's exactly where we are. It's not okay. Golf is just trying to piece all of this together now, right? Because that's where I've been earlier too. It's just been a roller coaster of a season from super high beginning. Everyone's all hyped up to down in the dumps, then we're back up again, then we're down in the dumps, and then right here at the end we get a little glimmer of hope, and then they snatch it away from us again, and now we're all wondering, are we, anywhere different from where we started? And I think the fact that we're able to ask ourselves that question is why we all have a precedent to want more for this team, for this program, and maybe expect some changes in the near future for sure. Eric Flower said it better be 7-5 or he'll roll up and help Brown pack up his shit. Hey, I don't blame you, Eric. I don't blame you. I know the feeling, man. I know the feeling. I think a lot of them agree with you there. Eric Flowers, he did. I don't know if it was lower leg or ankle. I believe it was ankle, but yeah, it was turned. It was gruesome, man. Thoughts and prayers to that guy. Yeah, GG goes 13-39, 50%. If you have to throw 40 times, what would happen with that? With a guy that connects at a much higher percentage. Good point, Eric. Good point. I think Nico would have probably completed a higher percentage of those passes, but also, the counter to that is Garrett Green had, 120 some rushing yards, and it was probably more than that before they took away sacks. Nico's probably not getting that. So, it's like robbing Peter to pay Paul between those two, really. I think that's why it's such a tough decision because, yeah, maybe we pass the ball a little bit better. Maybe it helps us towards the end of the game, but also are we in that position there in the second half and able to, make that game without Garrett's running ability in the first half? So it's really a catch-22. If you could have, both of those guys' traits mixed into one quarterback, we'd really be cooking with gas. But unfortunately, trying to make do with what we have. And unfortunately, one guy throws it better, but you don't have the explosive in the run game. And then one guy has the explosive run game, but he's at best going to give you 50% completion. It's just where he is and where he has been. For sure. Gary Winland with a good point here. I've heard since he was a kid from coaches and broadcasters that regardless how bad or good a team is, by the end of the season, the players in the team should be better and not worse. And if they are not, then it is on the coaching. Great point. And it goes back to something that, has been said before as well. You either get better or you get worse. You don't stay the same. It's one or the other. And a lot of the time, I'm wondering if it's gotten better, and there's maybe some areas you can point to, but more often than not, there isn't. And, a lot of that does come back to coaching, unfortunately. And, the things that continue to reflect in games reflect poorly on coaching. And that's just the proof is in the pudding there for that one, unfortunately. And do I think that it will happen? Personally, I think it depends on these last two games. I think if we go 6-6, it's a lot less likely. I think if we lose the next two, I'd be surprised if it didn't happen. But does that mean I want us to lose the next two? Absolutely not. I'm never going to root against. It's always going to be behind the Mountaineers. But it is time for a change. As Eric Flowers says here, it's time for a coaching change. You can't make our stadium a place for a lock win. Yeah, exactly. And that's what it's been this year. That's what it's been, guys. As I said earlier, shout out to Chris Anderson for uncovering the stat. If West Virginia loses to UCF, it'll be only the second time in 133 years of WVU football that you've had 5 home losses. Can't happen. Can't happen. This is supposed to be a place where you have a home field advantage, and you can't let that happen. So I appreciate you guys, man. I appreciate we had some good turnout here on this live. Maybe we'll do it again here in the near future for some future podcast episodes. But having said that, guys, West Virginia falls, unfortunately, 49-35 to Baylor to drop to 5-5 overall in the season, 4-3 in Big 12 conference play, 2 games remaining, 1 on the road, one at home, back at home next week against UCF. 3:30 kick it's been announced as. One final home game. Let's turn out for these seniors that have given, blood, sweat, and tears for this program. And let's just keep our fingers crossed that we can get the win at home that we're much due and much deserved here as a fan base, guys. We've been coming, steadily throughout the season. Hopefully we're rewarded with a good performance next week. But nonetheless, we'll be back to talk about it later this week on what will be episode 210 of the CRW podcast, our UCF preview and predictions episode. Appreciate you guys tuning in here for the Baylor review and reaction. Covered the game, some interesting things of note, and talked a little bit more of the Big 12 conference, and we'll continue to do that here throughout the final 2 weeks. Hard to believe this season's already this close to being done here halfway through November, guys. But despite the fact we haven't gotten the results that we wanted overall, I've still enjoyed covering this team and getting to chat with you guys when I have, the live streams throughout the week and all of that good stuff. And appreciate you guys continually tuning into the podcast throughout the season. And we will be here throughout the remainder of the season, regardless of the results. And we'll be cheering on the Mountaineers, regardless of the results. And, regardless of what's happening, we're always behind this team and rooting for the best possible outcomes down the line and in the future. Appreciate you guys tuning into this one. As always, I'm Jordan Cruz. And until next time, let's go Mountaineers.